Hey, welcome to the BBA today. I think this is episode number 97. We are at the 2063 free agent sim, first sim of the free agent season. The BBA today is the podcast where we cover the Brewster Baseball Association every day that we have a podcast anyway. My name is Ron Collins. Again, I am the general manager of the Bikini Krill, and I have Kurt Imber with me, who is the general manager of the San Fernando Bears. Kurt, it's been an adventure here today, so thanks for hanging with us and welcome aboard and all that other good stuff. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ron. Like I told you right before we started this, my wife is due with our second child on Thursday. So my life is just kind of like hanging in the balance here day to day, waiting for the call. Um, but past the time, there's nothing I'd rather be talking about than some Brewster baseball.
I think it is patently unfair that guys like you, Chad, and Rob, and so forth are deeply working on your farm systems all the time like this. It just, I don't know what to do, man. I don't know what to do.
I,
So,
I might be coaching a t-ball team soon. I feel like scouting some t-ballers will help get me in the right mindset for looking over the free agent list this
I like
offseason.
that. I like that. I think a lot of my hitters would be better off if they could T-ball it, as far as that is
Yeah.
concerned. Um, our strikeout rate will be going up heavily since we made the critical decision to retender Mike McClure.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was surprised by that. You had convinced yourself back and forth. How many times do you think you changed your mind?
Oh goodness, probably at least 15 or 20 times. um,
What what ended up being the deciding factor? What was like the final thing that made you swing back towards tendering
um,
him the contract?
I wasn't sure that I'd be able to find really better in free agency at a price point as far as that's concerned. And um, then I've also seen a little bit of flakiness in what Guillermo Arce's development over the past month or two, and I wasn't certain that he was going to really be ready. Um, so I figured I would go ahead and do that. Um, kind of running out the chain of what ifs. I started looking at it from a perspective of, McClure could still have some value and have some interest as we move through the off season and through spring training. If either Juan Ramos, who's played outfield, or Arce shows they can handle the job for cheaper, then I could probably make some kind of a financial thing where I hold, retained salary for 1 year on McClure and give him away, whatever, for essentially for free. So the financial ramifications weren't that high. So I kind of look at him as a risk mitigation factor right now. He fits in the ballpark of the finances that we're playing in, as far as that is concerned. If I end up being able to turn a bigger deal and I can find a bona fide hitter, I've also been scouring the rest of the teams here for deals that I think that I can really make for an impact player. And while there are a billion trades being made, it's really an interesting trade market right now. Maybe we can talk about that a little bit, be interested in your perspective of things. I'm not sure that I'm really still willing to pay the price for. I'm not to the point where I think I've got one guy that will put me over the top. So I don't know that I'm willing to pay the price that people will want for a real kind of superstar quite yet. But I don't know. Maybe I'll convince myself otherwise. So, what are your thoughts about the volume trading that's going on right now?
It's kind of surprising with the uncertainty of the new version of the game. Like last time we were switching, I feel like there were several teams that took vows to take a year off and just observe and that's not happening this time around. I mean, I think some of it's being fueled by you have like Brooklyn just like totally clearing out all of their contracts. They're just totally open for sale. So
Right.
they're a big piece of it. But there's been a bunch of minor league swaps, which like I think you've pointed out before, isn't really a common thing
Mm-hmm.
in the Brewster, and some of that is taking, I don't want to say taking advantage of, it's not like they're taking advantage of the other GMs, but people seeing some different things in the new version of the game and trying to get an edge with those. You know, I noticed like Bob and the Brooms in Montreal are leaning into platoon splits. You know, the word is the new game is supposed to have more pronounced splits, and you can see it in the ratings more on the new Stats Plus pages. And so Bob started assembling a platoon offense
Mm-hmm.
right away, and so that's some of what's going on too. What other things am I forgetting here that have been happening?
Yeah, I think in that sense also, I am intrigued by how a topic that we've talked about a couple of times in the last couple of episodes, at least brushed upon, is the raw number of at least workable young players. You know, the drafts for the past couple of seasons have been fairly deep, but I wouldn't say they're really super steeped in superstars. So you end up with an environment that has a lot of young players who can at least play and fill some vital roles. And so maybe that is increasing the amount of churn also, because kind of the middling teams and so forth can go out and find bits and pieces and parts that improve their roster one way or the other. I am intrigued by the version 26 conversion, and my personal take on it, and my gut hot take on it, it's striking me at this point, is I don't think that version 25 was particularly well liked for not unreasonable reasons, and I think there is some optimism that 26 will be, if nothing else, a little bit more fun. I could be wrong on that completely, but I do just kind of get the feeling that there is more optimism moving to 26 than there was moving to 25, and I share some of that. I was a proponent of moving to 25 when we moved to 25, but a part of that was I felt like it was going to be a fairly substantial systemic change, and we might as well just do it and get it out of the way. That personality trait may not be shared by everybody, but it was on my mind. So I think there are 4 or 5 different things going on here, and definitely Shoeless picking up Brooklyn. I mean, my fundamental take, I'm going to be very interested to see what Ben does with Sacramento, but my fundamental take on Ben in Brooklyn is he was too invested into things and he wasn't ready to do the full teardown that needed to be. Shoeless went into it completely attempting to tear down. So it's like a total shift in paradigm there, which really opens up the trade market. When you get a lower division team who is really ready to start moving all their players, it influences the entire market to some degree. So
I was curious to see, he's written I think 2 team news posts about it now, and I was kind of curious if he considered some of the players he's been getting back return at all. And he was pretty honest in those posts, like calling them quadruple A players, and I think we all know he's being a little modest perhaps, but he's not wrong. None of those guys really have track records, so he really was just kind of happy to get rid of the contracts, and that was the purpose of those trades.
yeah,
Purely, like you said, just tearing the Band-Aid off.
right. And fundamentally, Brooklyn, whatever Shoeless or Ben back in the day could have gotten out of those guys. My take on it is whatever he could have gotten out of those guys is fantastic if they can win some games this coming year. I made the flippant comment of 40, and Shoeless came back saying, what was something like "I'd rather die," or I can't remember what he what he commented, that he would weep. I guess that was what it was. I don't think they'll only win 40, but I think they'll be super struggling. But they needed to do that for the raw finances of the game. Um, they were not going to go any further. They were in the death spiral on the finances, as far as I can see, anyway. Um,
Yeah, but to go back to what you were saying before about there being maybe four or five different factors right now, one thing that I perceive, I haven't been in the league a very long time, but it's like 11 or 12 years now. I think this might be like the strongest group of GMs we've had since I've been here. Like most of the strong GMs when I joined are still in the league, but I feel like we've picked up quite a few as well over the last decade. So I think that's part of it. Good GMs, I think, are going to be more active. They maybe more capacity for it, but also know exactly what they want to build. And then I think this is what you were saying, but I'll just add my own flavoring to it. I think there's kind of a flat talent level too. Aaron pointed out something interesting on I think the Discord, like that there's no 80 rated players right now, and that I don't. That's just probably new skin on something that's not necessarily that different, but like there is like a new crop of players. They're all a lot closer together in skill level, and when that happens, people are going to have preferences, and they're going to find players that platoon or play to their certain style, and so everybody I think is kind of lining up to make trades and transactions to fit their own personality and building style.
yeah, yeah. I don't know how much the call it lack of 80s. The rating,
Dave
the
Ackerman's an
version.
80. Let's be real, right? Like
What's that?
as much as Dave Ackerman is as much of an 80 as he's ever been. There's definitely still players like that,
Yeah,
but
yeah. The
uh, you
out of the park overall ratings are always a fanciful thing to me. They're very, I mean, they're helpful. It's nice to have the numbers out there, and there's some level of relativeness to them and so forth. But back when I first came into Bikini and I looked at it and it said Michael Buckley was a 75, I said, well, obviously that's not that's not true. He's maybe a 60 at best and probably more like a 55. You know that going in. But yeah, that question, what is the skin of the overall ratings, um, is is always interesting. And I know that Out of the Park itself is attempting to, has been for the both 25 and 26, reducing that top end, right? But it feels it feels to someone who is like me unrealistic when you have 25 80s and 30 70s, right? I mean, that just it doesn't it doesn't really play right. So we've got a squashing of the overall ratings anyway, which then means you know Sean is. It's not unusual to see Sean making some kind of a comment about how all these 50s. He struggles with. I'll say he struggles. He does not like the squashing of everything down into smaller numbers, but it then becomes the way you rate the components are more valuable or more important, right? How you read that, and then in the concept of reading stats and playing essentially stats only kind of flavor, how a guy hits 350 in 200 at bats or a guy hits 350 in 400 at bats. Clearly, the 400 at bat number is more reliable, but even that's not 100% reliable. You don't actually know. You have to play the game inside your head. So how much do those kind of things play into the raw number of trades? You start to see a whole bunch of players are rated 50. Well, then suddenly somebody is maybe more comfortable trading that 50 player when a version ago that player would be rated 60, and so they're going to assess them higher just based on that thing. I don't know. That's That is the beauty of playing the game against other human beings, is because we all get to measure things ourselves. I will tend to agree with your comment on the activity of general managers inside the league right now. I always get angsty when I hear somebody, other than the fact that all the Pacific general managers are the best general managers on the planet. We all know that, right? But yeah, I always get a little angsty when I start saying, well, this group of general managers is better than that group of general managers. You know, I think fundamentally we attract in the Brewster a lot of pretty interested general managers, and even the newest ones come in. A new general manager who is active and really interested in learning can become, in quotes, good, whatever we call that, fairly quickly here. I mean, it's not like rocket science that we're playing with, and as long as the game is pretty well designed and we understand a little bit about baseball, we can field a pretty good team in the context of our financials and whatnot. Most general managers do take a season or three to really kind of get a flavor for our financials, because they're a little weird in relation to regular baseball. But I do agree. It seems to me like we have a lot of really active general managers right now who are actively attempting to improve their team. And even if their plan goes haywire, well, next year they've got another plan, and there's more activity going on. I believe that's probably the fundamental reason why Portland had such a hard time this last season, is because I think Chris became one of the relatively few general managers who just didn't have the time to spend on it, and his team suffered a few wins simply because he wasn't adjusting things all the time. And I think that's one of the great things about having a league with a lot of active general managers. And one of the things I love, sometimes I get a little bit, I'll call it angsty, when I will see, when Matt will come back and complain. He does one of his pre-sim things, and you get, 3 guys missed their sim, and I think of, well, that's pretty good actually. But Matt will go, oh, come on, guys. He really wants to drive everyone to be participating every single sim, and fantastic on him. The reality of the matter is if we get 3 people missing a sim in the context of most online leagues I've been in, that's fantastic, right? But his point of view is he really wants everyone to be involved every sim if at all possible, and that drives this kind of a situation. So
I definitely use good GM just as a shorthand. It didn't
yeah,
necessarily mean anything by it, but I'm trying to think of it a different way now too, which is that we have a very experienced group of GMs. So I'm looking at the team list on the front page of Stats Plus, and I can't think of anybody who's been in the league right now less than 2 or 3 years, because even the couple openings we've had have been filled, like
right.
Justin Niles, who's spent a long time in the league. And I think I joined during a weird time too. I think you were out at the time, and when I joined, I'd actually skipped. I never played in the GBC and went straight into the Brewster, which I don't think is
You're
a
one of the
very
few.
normal. Yeah. So like that was partially what made the learning curve tough for me, is I just jumped straight in, and so that's part of it. Like everybody kind of knows what they're doing. I don't think there's anybody who's lost with the league settings right now.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. And we're still getting some good, solid flow into the GBC. I think some of the guys that have been in the GBC have been there for a couple of seasons now, and they're starting to get the hang of that. So it's always fun when both leagues are churning along pretty well, right? So,
And
so
then
what do you think?
with the flat talent level, a lot of the other trades, we've got the fire sale trades from Brooklyn. We got the teams trying to build their platoons and build teams to their taste or their interest. And then I think there's also been a lot of 40-man trades, which ties back into some of the other things we've talked about, like the Rule 5 draft seems a little more impactful right now than maybe it's been in the past. And I know just from like my own perspective, every trade I made was just a guy who I thought about putting on waivers, and I've learned over the years that I don't tend to be able to sneak guys through waivers. I think I have a group of players at the part of my 40-man roster that other people seem to like. So I just took whatever cash I could get for some of them. And I've seen some other trades too. I know like Yellow
Right.
Springs posted a list of guys where they're just like, I don't really want to keep these guys. Who wants them? And um, Rob traded a couple players that way as well. So I mean, that's just smart GMing, right? Get a little bit of something,
Yep.
get
And,
a
and we may
lottery pick or get some cash.
and we may see even more of that as this group of younger players goes through and becomes 40-man eligible, Rule 5 eligible.
Yep. But
So,
but a group of not young players is the group of players sitting out in free agency. That's probably what's got most people's attention right now. We're recording this Sunday afternoon. I
mhm.
think there's a sim tonight, right? Yeah, first.
There you go. First major free agent sim of the season. So yeah,
Uh,
I'm looking forward to that. Who do you expect to be the movers in free agency right now? Do you have any thoughts on that?
well, one thing I do know is everyone's going to be disappointed tonight when like nobody signs, basically, because that's what happens every year. I think this sim will take us to December 1st. It's like 2 weeks, and with the players asking prices on the top end even being higher than it has been in the past, I'll be really surprised if anybody signs. So normally, I think what we see out of this sim is just starting to get the lay of the land as far as what free agents are getting 5 offers and which ones are getting 0 offers is usually how I think of this next one coming up. So as far as the players who I think are going to get a lot of offers, um, there's basically only a few infielders, I think, in free agency. I'm not counting first baseman, DH types. So I would think like Sam, the guy from Sacramento, their old
Hmm.
shortstop. I would think he's going to get a lot of attention. I also think teams are going to like that he's a little like they're going to like that he's older, just in the sense that he should only get a few years. I don't remember what he was demanding. I'll admit San Fernando won't be making an offer. So I did not open the page to see how many years he was looking for, but I think he'll be popular. And I think Dave Molina, the starting pitcher, I think somebody will view him as a starting pitcher. You'd think with 32 different GMs, somebody will view him that way, and you would think that would mean a bigger offer than as a reliever,
Yeah.
just in years and dollars.
Yeah, when I look at Isam, and I assume that the requests are slightly different for all the teams. I don't really know for
Oh yeah,
sure. But when I look at Isam, he's asking for 5 years, with the last year being some kind of an option. Um,
good luck,
Molina,
buddy.
he's asking, what's that?
I said good luck, buddy, with those 5 years. He's
Yeah,
30, 35.
he's
We'll see.
35. You never know. And you look at Molina, and I think he's asking for 6 from me. There's a couple others. Kawano's asking for a bunch. Shepperson's asking for, um, Shepperson was the one I was looking at as a possible McClure um, upgrade. Plug him in at first base and see what happens with his ugly defense. But McClure's defense hasn't been particularly sterling either, so either way. But I realized I probably couldn't afford Shepperson anyway. The the starting pitching group, the top, I think, 4 or 5 are Molina, Sakataro Kawano, my own John Brown. Josh Clark is an interesting candidate coming out of Madison. I was kind of wondering whether Mike Simon would trade Josh Clark at the end of last year, just because if I remember right, he had a player option that he
Hmm.
executed. So I assumed that Madison was hoping that Josh Clark would stick with them, but he did not. I would guess those are the 4 primary starters. Maybe Tommy Akers. Akers
Yep.
is 30 years old and an interesting candidate. But yeah, I'm going to be very interested to see what happens with the David Molina thing. If there is a pitcher who's going to be worth his contract, assuming he does not get hurt. Maybe he's the guy, but he's been fragile. But somehow or another, Chad in Nashville has kept him on the field most of the time. Um, I'm also very intrigued by, I look at the number, I do a quick scan of who's got the money versus a low payroll, and four teams come to mind. If I just do the mental math, I have no idea how that plays in with the rest of their expense structures and things like that. But the new Brook Park, is it Brook Park? The old Omaha club has a big chunk of a relatively big chunk of change and a low payroll. Yellow Springs and Louisville, we've talked about them, I think, in the past as being prepared, and both of them could use some pitching. So the question there is would either one of them overpay in a massive overpay? I like I say, I just don't know if that plays. And then the third one is the new Omaha, Rocky Mountain, also has a pretty good gap between what I see as their cash available and their moderately low payroll. My bikini team fits in there with a moderately low payroll, but we don't have quite the same cash resources that those other four do. But if you wanted to play the salary cap gap game, I fit in there.
Yeah, you said you would probably spend around 80 million on payroll, right? So
Yeah,
that gives you 25 million to play with.
yeah. So I mean, I could try to make a play like that, but it would be. I've got another item or two that I would like to actually fill. I will say, if David Molina is still hanging out there come mid-January and has, I understand David Molina actually wants to play for Bikini and will take a $10 million contract. So if that's true, then you can expect to see David Molina on the Krill come next year. How's that for rumor mongering? I think you could say that about 31 other general managers.
Yeah. If he is out there, you're going to get, about 20 offers. That's him. So just make sure you account for that in your offer.
There you go. But yeah, I am interested in those starting pitchers. Obviously, I think I do think Shepperson is the high quality power hitter that's available. Haven't really looked at Vicente Rivera. He let me look at him real quick here.
So some other teams that I could see making big offers, Ron, while you look at Rivera. Chon usually makes some spicy moves, and Phoenix is down to a 50. They're about where you are in payroll, 55-ish million.
Yeah, that is true.
And they have a bunch of young talent that's about to graduate from Toledo, so he could sign a big free agent. I could see them win like 90 games easily.
That is true. I could see him winning 85 or 90 games just by bringing Toledo up.
Right. Yeah. I posted that thing about like run differentials and expected wins, and I mean, based on runs, he should have had like a 500 team last year. So there's a base.
Right.
It's not even that bad to build off of. And then like New Orleans is at 65 million, and Jim usually makes some smart free agent signings. So I think he'll be in the mix. Just going up the list, Cape Fear is under 70 million, and they made the playoffs last year. They'll probably offer some. Aaron in Jacksonville underachieved. They're at 71 million. He usually doesn't make huge free agent splashes, but he could if he wanted to.
He has in the past done some pretty big things with extensions. He's been a little bit of an enigma. Jacksonville has been a little bit of an enigma for the past couple of seasons, in that Aaron has not made big splashes, but has just consistently done Aaron things and usually been in pretty good shape. But the wheels kind of fell off this year. So I'd be interested to see if he just kind of gets perturbed and goes out and does something. It's just going to be a fascinating year. The whole Atlantic division is turning into a bit of a meat grinder. So you never know when one of those general managers might just say, screw it, I'm going to go all in and give David Molina $30 million for 5 years or something like that. And I have a feeling that if somebody offers him $30 million for 5, he'll probably take it. But
Yeah, I would think so. That's huge.
Speaking as David
Um,
Molina's agent, go ahead, guys, knock yourself out.
but once you get above Jacksonville, there's a couple other teams in the low seven, like Hawaii at 73. They were a playoff team last year.
Mm,
They, they usually sign some free agents, but you pretty quickly get above 80 million after that, and there's not a ton of wiggle room once you're above 80 million, unless you're one of those teams that actually makes a bunch of money, which you and I wouldn't know anything about.
there you go.
Um, so,
Yeah,
what do you think of Rivera?
I'm not sure that Hawaii has the raw cash to get up to salary cap levels, but I could be wrong on that. I haven't. I should
They
spend more
added
time
seats,
looking at my.
right?
What's that?
They added seats to their stadium. They
Yeah,
added seats to their stadium so they can make more money at least.
yeah. There you go. But then
In theory.
you got to bet on the future. You got to bet on the number goes up on attendance in the
Hmm.
future if you're going to extend yourself out past your comfortable cash plus projected salary. Vicente Rivera's at 27. Um, didn't look at what he's asking for. He's one of those guys that has not had fantastic performance for most of the time. He did 3.3 WAR with Valencia, and then has had a couple of ugliness seasons. But now he's asking for 8.5 million for 6. He's not going to get 8.5 million for 6, I don't think. But he's depends on other teams' needs for first base, and maybe I am expressing my Mike McClure problems, right? Most likely, if I was going to have dumped McClure, a guy like Rivera would have been on my agenda, which is why I decided to go ahead and keep McClure, because I figured he would be cheaper for 1 year than if I had to go out and buy a Vicente Rivera kind of a player. Um, but I do
Somebody
think,
will sign for like 1 year, 5 million. But the thing is, you don't get to pick the guy. Then you just get the guy who's kind of left at the end of free agency. So
yeah,
you lose your own agency a little bit in that sense.
right. And that's a question when you look at these first base corner outfielder guys who are in free agency. How far depressed will their numbers be? Right now they're asking for whatever they think the right market is. But as you said last time we were together, the market actually ends up mostly deciding what the numbers are going to end up being. So my guess is those kind of guys are not going to sign anywhere in December or maybe not even January. They may be signing in February, and we'll find out what the real market is for those guys. I
The
don't know. We'll
the
see.
top war guy. I'm on Stats Plus, so I'm just sorted by their statistics.
Hmm.
The top war guy on the hitter side is Jason Newton from New Orleans.
Yeah, that's right. I remember
He's,
that.
he's only 32. What kind of market do you think he could have? He can't play second though, can he?
He can stand out at second. he is that what is it? He's a standout in second base. Um,
He's a fan
his
favorite.
bat
He'll bring
can.
people to the park.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of those questions. I think if somebody is willing to sacrifice a little bit of defense, then he can play. Um, my standing desk I hit my button.
It sounds like a tornado siren. I'm glad it's not that.
Back up. Okay. um, I'm going off memory. I think he will make a pretty reasonable chunk. I think he's asking, like most groups, he's asking, like most players, I believe he is asking more than he is worth. But we'll find out as far as that goes. Yes, I think he could play second base. If I could get him for a 1 year contract right now with, I'm concerned, my own Napoleon Mellet. But, I decided to give Mellet his $6 million in the hopes that he would hang on for another year. I could see, I want to say that Newsom is asking for like 8, and I could see giving him 7 or 8 for 1 year. He would be not a very good defender, but if he does a -4 or -6 zone rating, but puts up 3 WAR, he's still a plus, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's where he played last year. He even played some shortstop last year
Yeah,
for New Orleans, and still was
yeah,
3+4.
yeah. He, if I remember right, he cannot play shortstop.
Not advised.
Yeah,
No.
quite ill-advised to play him at shortstop. But then at the end of the day, you play who you need to play. I mean, I played Glenn Barham at center field for the last 30 days of the season last year, and he is in no book a center fielder. But when I traded Mike Cox, there was not many other options at that stage. So, welcome to center field, Glenn.
You're making opportunities in the corners, right? And Jim, I've been doing the same thing. Newton
There you
plays
go.
shortstop. Let's see somebody else at second because I know he's not going to be here next year.
There you go. So, so it should be a fascinating free agency start. I tend to agree with your point. I doubt that you're going to see too many players signing in this first sim. On occasion, you'll get one or two guys who, I mean, if somebody offers David Molina $30 million for 5 or 6 years, I bet he'll sign. But I don't think anybody's going to offer him $30 million for 6 years. That's
Yeah, if Rocky Mountain offers Isam $40 million, we might see him sign.
There you go. That's what Justin says. Hold my beer. I liked. I've enjoyed listening to Justin talk about how he's going to offer Sacramento's Isom, $40 million to go play shortstop for him. That is a big loss for Sacramento. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Maybe they'll bring him back. Obviously, Sacramento's got the batter Isom-sized hole in their payroll, so they could offer to bring him back. Never know.
Yeah. They're sitting at $91 million, so they can offer him up to close to $20 million. They just would be done, essentially. I think this payroll number I'm looking on Stats Plus might include like your whole 40 man. So I think it's a few.
Yeah,
might be a little high. I'm not really sure. But.
Probably does. So if you pare it down by $3 million or something like that, you'd probably get close.
Yep.
So, and I know another thing that has gone on in the past week or two is there have been 3 or 4 contracts actually signed. Vancouver signed Dirk Bessi to that big 6-year deal. It counts as a full 6-year deal in my brain because it's full of player options. So at the end of the day, the player has complete control over that. I think Twin Cities also signed their starter. Was it Eric Brooks?
Mm-hmm.
Calgary signed first baseman Michael Little, 27 or 28 year, a young power hitting first baseman to a fairly stout, substantial contract. I thought those were interesting. I like the Twin Cities deal probably best of all of them, although it's hard to really complain about the Calgary deal for a youngish power hitter. He should hold on to his stuff during that time period. The Bessi deal, I'm very interested in what your thoughts are on, as a Pacific rival. I'm interested in your thoughts on the Vancouver signing of Dirk Bessi to 6 seasons. Fragile, what is he, 30 years old right now?
He's wrecked now.
Is he wrecked?
He's gone to wrecked.
Okay. What are your thoughts? What did you think about it? That's a gutsy move.
That's my rival, me and Aaron. I think it's a little scary. I'm afraid to say anything too definitive because he's probably going to shut me out a couple times next year. But the opt-out and then 3-player options, it's a scary contract if it was just guaranteed, but that means if he does randomly stay healthy, he gets to opt out or take it year to year. And Vancouver is super young right now, and so their finances are fine. It doesn't matter for the next couple of years, but they do have some pretty good young players that presumably Aaron wants to keep around, and they'll get a little more expensive.
Mhm.
There's just a lot of risk with it, and I, I love my run differentials. I think he overachieved a little bit next year, and Aaron, well, what makes Aaron so great is if his team struggles next year, he'll make all the like right trades to kind of change his window, and if his team is in decent position, he'll make all the trades to accelerate his window. That's like I think Aaron's biggest strength as a GM is just like moving that window around. Everybody else has like this kind of some more static plan, and he's just always building the car as he drives it. But really, really scary contract. I don't know how you could come to almost any other conclusion, especially since he's just had like the big injury at the end of the year. I guess he's probably healed by now. Aaron also said he was going to do the dev lab with him, and like he could he's already wrecked, so maybe there's no risk. But like, can you end a guy's career with the dev lab? Like what could happen? I don't even know what the most negative consequence is. More wrecked, extra wrecked.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't know.
sure.
That's that question about the negative ramifications of the dev lab is something that I've seen floating through our general managers and just the general out of the park community. Um, I am not close enough to the development side of that. I've not really paid that much attention to it, except that I hear people talking about it all the time. Um, my flavor on it is the negative ramifications tend to be around ratings, which
Hmm.
annoys me personally. It offends my personal aesthetic because I don't think about it. Feels untoward that a player goes to a place to work on their skills and just gets massively worse. What I would expect is that instead of, if I were designing it, it wouldn't be about losing ratings. It would be about more likely injuries or something like that. I suppose if you had really bad coaching, you could just get worse. I don't know. Um,
Hey, you can
uh,
start selling out for home runs, and all of a sudden your swing's messed up or something like that, right?
yeah,
Maybe.
maybe. I'm not saying that's wrong. It just doesn't make me feel the warm fuzzies. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, I assume that he's going to be putting Bessie into the dev lab for endurance kind of things. The only thing that I am aware on the dev lab on that is that if you're too wrecked, then it won't allow you to do that. I don't know where Bessie will work out. I know he's just recently become wrecked, so maybe he's not too wrecked. I don't know. Um, it'd be fantastic to actually, for someone who is like me, it would be fantastic to actually be able to see the internal ratings because I find those to be even more fun and interesting. Other people don't share my my perspective on what makes for fun, which is completely fine. Um, so I'm interested in the dev lab. I know for my I think I said last time that I've found using the development lab even more fun than I thought that I would. I thought it would feel kind of gamey, but actually it feels it has been a lot of fun for me to sort through my 30 or 50 people that I would like to put into things and realize I can't have it all. So now I've got to prioritize and make judgments as to what I think the most likely values are and whatnot, which makes fun. The more items that I can think through, the more fun it is for me.
Oh, we can say this about Bessie. When he's on the field, he'll probably be very good, barring any sort of dev lab impacts.
Hmm.
Um, every year he's pitched, he's had some durability issues, but probably underrated going into last year, or like not properly appreciated around the league. It's like one of the best pitchers. I think he maybe doesn't stay up high enough in like your pitcher ranking list because of some of the time he's missed.
Hmm.
Different ways we benchmark the starters, and pitched on Chicago for a while Chicago was not winning very many games. But Bessie is very, very good.
Yeah, and even when he was with Chicago, he was high up on the ratings when he was on the field. Um, And I like the ratings aspect in that sense because, if you're going to be a top pitcher, you have to be able to take the ball every 5 days. Um, so if you can't do that all the time, then obviously you're not going to rank in the top five all the time. That only seems reasonable for what that system is trying to do. I agree with you. 6 years for Bessi is. I thought that showed a lot of guts. If at 6 years at 20 million, and I don't even think it's massively front loaded, is it? I don't remember the exact contract, but if something goes wrong in the first year or two, that becomes a weight sometime. If it goes wrong in year 4, then Aaron will do his magic and nothing bad will happen. So I think this first year or two is a pretty big deal. Bessi, however, has also been injured moderately often. Compare him to like Molina, who is fragile and carries risk, but at least, as I recall, his injury record is not too extensive over the past 2 to 3 years. So at 28, I've seen pitchers that have carried the fragile tag for several years and not gotten hurt. What are the probabilities? I don't know. It would feel to me like Molina is less of a risk than Bessi, but that's not necessarily saying much, right? So
maybe it's the role. He's been working out of the bullpen, Molina, but
yeah,
he threw 150 innings out of the bullpen last year. I don't know if he could throw that many more innings as a starter.
yeah, there you go.
So I know people might view him as a starter, but if you don't get more innings out of it, you're better off using them as a reliever where you control the leverage.
Yeah, it probably depends on the rest of your team as far as that goes too. If you're Louisville or Yellow Springs, both of those are in really similar situations. As I recall, it's been a week or two since I really looked at their rosters, but both of them are desperate, I think, for pitching. So that would be just a matter of where do you think you absolutely optimize your leverage. I will tell you, if Molina comes to us in a $10 million 1-year deal, I would be, right this moment, I would be sorely tempted to start him simply because I'm already 3 to 5 pitchers deep on the bullpen. And, right now with John Brown having left, and we'll see what happens, right? So I think the decision of where Molina pitches, the advantage of Molina is that he can pitch out of either direction and probably be highly valuable. And maybe I would be tempted to use him like I've used Vidaka before, which is start him 6 or 8 times a year and relieve him the rest of the time. I don't know. That's a great what if, because I don't see that happening in the near future. Anyway. It is an interesting collection of free agents when it comes right down to it, because we've got in the new out of the park rating systems, Molina, when I'm scanning through, I see a 75, Shepperson's a 65, Kawano's a 60. We've got 6 or 10 55s and quite a few 50s. So all of those guys are valuable, workable baseball players, right? And how they will fit into rosters is going to be fun to watch.
Molina's definitely going to get 6 years, right? As a 28-year-old, I just think to top each other's offers, unless somebody's offering 30 or 40 a year, he's going to get 6 years.
Yeah, it's a pretty reasonable guess anyway, expectation. Because that would run him through 33, 28, 29, yeah. 30, 31, 32, 33, yeah. And that, again, assuming that he's healthy, and through 33, he should be still pretty good. makes for a lot of anxiety amongst the 6 or 10 or 15, however many, who are going to actively work to try to bring David Molina to them. And don't completely, well, yeah, I don't see Nashville's going to be able to have the money to do that. If they did, they would have already signed him. I want to say their payroll's in the 90s somewhere. I don't have it in front of me. So I don't think they're going to be able to afford the number that Molina will bring in.
Yeah, they're at 95 per Stats Plus. And like you said, more than anything else, I just think Chad would have extended him.
Yeah.
You get a better price,
Yep.
not competing against 31 other GMs for the player.
Yep.
So 6 years, probably 20-ish million a year. I think the over-under number for me is like 110 for the total value of his contract. Probably over. Where would you set it? You live in Vegas. Where are you setting your over-under for the Molina
I could see
contract?
110. I mean, Bessi got 100. Under the conversation that I just had, that Bessi is more risky than Molina, and under the viewpoint that it's going to be a free agency bidding war, right? I could see 110, 100. I could see 120 in that sense. If it's 6 for 20, he's asking for essentially 120, 125, whatever what is this? Let me pull that up and actually see what he's asking from me anyway. I mean, other than the $10 million 1 year deal that he's already kind of told me that he wants. Yeah, he's asking for 127 for 6 from the Krill. I don't know if he's going to get 127, but he might. It's for like 21 a pop.
He was so good last year.
He's been
like ridiculously good.
I mean, I've made no bones since the day that he showed up and during all the conversations when he went to Nashville. I mean, in my opinion, you talk about Bessi being very good when he's on the field. I mean, David Molina is probably the best ounce for ounce pitcher in the league, talent for talent, at this precise moment. If he were not a 3 stamina, if he were a 5 or 7 stamina, that 21 he's asking for might be 25, right? And if he were not fragile, he might get that. He might get that anyway, And
if he had 7 stamina, he'd get $180 million, I think, as a free agent.
Yeah, that would be going a ways, but it's not completely impossible. 30 million a pop for 6 years would be even more unusual than the numbers that we saw back in the real heyday. But one of the fun things about this precise moment is you have no idea what the future is going to bring, and who knows who's going to come in and. Maybe I will be zapped by lightning and I will put in a $30 million offer here once we're done recording, because I will have talked myself into this idea that Molina is the greatest. I don't even have to talk myself into it. He is probably, if not the most talented and the best pitcher in the league, he is probably in the top 3 without any real question. And you don't see a 28-year-old top pitcher in free agency very often. Who's to say that Nathan won't find a way to make some kind of a deal to drop his payroll down, and suddenly Molina's going to be on Charlotte? There are a lot of really inventive general managers in this league, and you just never know what's going to actually happen. It's an exciting thing. I enjoy watching the league. I enjoy watching what people are going to do, and you just never know. So
the decision, like Brian from Louisville mentioned, he was staring at the offer screen for a free agent. He mentioned this on Discord, and he said might be like a sim time decision whether he makes it. I think it has to be Molina. I don't know. Maybe it's one of the other ones, but the decisions like he and Rob have to make is their money better spent $25 million a year or something, $20 million a year for Molina, or do they want 660 type contracts with 2 pitchers. And what's better bang for their buck? Because both, especially like Louisville needs a lot of pitchers on their staff, so they have to decide, do they want to scoop up like John Brown and Tommy Akers? They can potentially get both for the same price that Molina gets if you offer enough years.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a lot of good young position players, both of them. So their teams are going to have much higher payrolls 4 or 5 years from now than they do now. But like both those teams are so low right now in payroll, like they really could make a couple of big offers and be totally fine for the next few years.
Right. If one of the general managers decides that they want to just go put all the pieces in for 2063, and you're willing to pay the baggage on a back end of a Molina contract like Vancouver has done with Bessi. I mean, I read Aaron to basically be saying we're going to try to win right now, and if that contract goes haywire with Bessi, then that's fine. He'll just eat it or deal with it, or the team will suck for a while, or whatever happens. If Louisville were to decide, I'm just going to make that happen and see what 25 million for 6, whatever, pick a number. Basically you're saying I'm going to put my future at risk for the golden present. And then if I get really lucky, then my future will still be great too. Because, I doubt that Molina is going to be healthy for 6 years. If I were making a 6-year mega deal for Molina, I would be doing it with the idea that I'm pretty certain that, knock on wood, it will be maybe year 3 or 4 rather than year 1. But I'm pretty certain there's going to be a season or 2 where I'm going to be essentially iced for my 25 or whatever million per year.
Yeah.
That's a fine game theory. You can decide to do that and see what happens.
Yeah, the fun game theory of it all is if like 6 teams all decide that this is the year they should do that, and they all make those kind of offers, and then you only get one of the players instead of like the 3 you think you're going to lock up. Like Portland or Hawaii could do the same thing, or you throw out like Charlotte. Looks like they have some money.
Yep.
I don't know. It's really interesting,
and then
isn't
in the
it?
meantime, you get Valencia goes in and scoops up Clark and Brown and Akers, and suddenly out of nowhere, I'm of the opinion that Valencia is going to have a very difficult season or 3. They play the quiet caution game, and they end up filling up their roster with guys who help them, and suddenly they're winning 85 and 87 games and going to the playoffs.
We're always checking our rearview mirror, aren't we? In the Pacific. Who's going to pass us? Lane does the same thing in Long Beach. He loves to build a team through free agency. So
I
never feel safe.
Yeah, I have always thought that you can never build a team in a franchise through free agency, and then Lane just keeps doing it. And I scratch my head and I go, how in the world? He's a better general manager than I when it comes to that skill set. I do not have that skill set. My own skill set is a different beast. So perhaps because I'm a bit risk averse when it comes to free agents and things like that. So I don't tend to. I don't like building through free agency. It is not my style. But I love watching other teams work on it.
It's too chaotic for you. I think you like lining up your farm system and putting all the little pieces in the right places, and building through free agency is just like running through a smoke-filled room or something. You just kind of grabbing anything you can off the shelf. This metaphor sucks, by the way, but it doesn't match your personality at all, because
it's not mine. I do
not
like
a controlled environment.
I do like to line my team up and see what I like to have a long-term plan, and I don't like to perturb the plan too much one way or the other until we get to the right spot.
Well, we'll say this as I continue to sort by payroll in Stats Plus. Get it to actually refresh. There we go. Twin Cities won't be a free agent player. They're at 106 million, and Matt in Vegas is at 100 million. He usually doesn't sign like the very top tier guys anyways, but
Yeah.
not going to be an option with that kind of payroll. And then Calgary, Des Moines, Nashville, Charm City, Montreal, Sacramento, they're all over in 90, almost 95 million, most of them. So they're probably out of some of these major sweepstakes as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's some big revenue teams there. So
Where's
they'll,
Austin right now? I
let's
don't
see.
have it in front of me. I'm intrigued by Chuck and his situation. Chuck and I think San Antonio had a bit of a run, but they may be having some financial. They may have a year where they need to double clutch. But I'm intrigued by Austin. Where do they sit?
Austin's at 79, so they're right in between. They need some pitching too. They're a good fit for some of these middle tier
Mm-hmm.
starting pitchers, you would think, but Chuck's got to probably go one direction or the other right now. He's talked about trading some of his position player depth, but I haven't seen that happen yet. And I guess trades will probably shake out more in a couple of sims after people lose out on some free agents and get desperate.
Yeah, we'll see.
San Antonio, 46, $47 million. They're towards the bottom of that list of currently locked in payroll figures. So San Antonio should be able to spend $30 million easily.
Yeah, it depends
The
on
tough thing,
depends on their revenue
they need
streams.
hitters. Yeah, and they need hitters, and there's not a lot of like. I personally prefer the depth pitcher in the free agent pool. I'd rather be Louisville or Yellow Springs and trying to build out my pitching staff than build out my position player side because none of these guys can play defense really that are free agents. It's mostly first base types.
Right. And if you're Louisville and Yellow Springs, you're actually that fits you pretty well because both of those teams. I mean, Louisville's offense, in my opinion, looks like it's going to be like they're just a bunch of clubbers. I mean, they. I think they were blasting the heck out of their opponents. That I think I said, as long as they can keep bludgeoning, they will keep winning. Then they've stopped bludgeoning. But Yellow Springs has a perfectly solid young core of hitters. I just think Louisville's hitters are a little bit better. But time will tell on that. That means that both Louisville and Yellow Springs are pretty well aligned to what I think the free agent pool is at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
But it will be interesting to see if they decide to go and fight each other for the David Molina thing, or whether they will check down and try to fill in quantity of decent versus one or two stellars. Great game theory.
Yellow Springs has the Hartman factor that I think gets forgotten about.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not all GMs, based on what Rob said about some of the trade offers he's getting for him, but he doesn't show up on the top 100 prospect lists, and he hasn't played in the majors yet. Rob's been pretty conservative with his movement through the minors, but Yellow Springs core looks a lot better once you put Hartman at shortstop, especially if you're a believer like I am that he's like got a 3-WAR floor.
Yeah.
I think he's a pretty good player. So that gets forgotten, I think, sometimes in the Yellow Springs mix.
Yeah. Well, I actually had intended, and maybe I still will write one sometime. I think I was going to write a feature on. There are 3 really super defensive and reasonable offensive shortstops coming up in the very near future. Hartman, of course, is probably the top tier number 1 guy on that list. Lucas McNeil Jr. is going to be an impact player in Nashville, of course. And then Atlantic City has Johnny Laser, who, I mean, I don't know if he's ever really going to hit, but arguably he could play defense in the majors right now. And as long as he hits even just a little bit, he'll be a solid 2-3-WAR kind of a guy. And all 3 of those guys being elite defenders, arguably make their pitching staff considerably better. So we may be hitting a era of, where we get 5-6 really super defensive shortstops. And Hartman is, again, probably the best because his bat, in my opinion, is going to be average-ish. which by definition makes him really solid for a shortstop. I'm not convinced Lucas McNeil Jr. is going to be average yet. Obviously, he's got the high contact, but the eye and, as I recall, the eye and power are quite suspect, which makes him really flighty. So,
yeah, and Laser still got, it's 22, still has some development left. The offense doesn't come in.
mm-hmm.
Then he's more in a tier where there's, I don't want to say dime a dozen because these shortstops are really valuable, but there's a handful of guys. Montreal has a guy, I traded them, whose name's escaping me, but I got him from Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
And Nashville has Johnny Reed kind of lurking in their AAA, who's a really good defender. And then I have a guy who's ready to break through named Jason Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Though those guys don't have the ceiling of the guys you mentioned because they don't have potential left. Or a guy in Montreal,
Right.
Gusto, just came to me.
There you go.
Mr. Gusto. Yeah, there's quite a few shortstops around the league that are ready to take the mantle as
Right.
like the next
Now
wave.
also what that basically means is that you're going to have a whole third of the league who will be complaining because they can't find a shortstop because the top tiers all look great, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even my own Keith Williams, for the early stage of his career, has been I would call it, should have been by ratings better than average shortstop, and he has mostly been a better than average zone rating, higher than zero zone rating. But by definition, when these guys start rolling in, then his relative zone rating is going to drop, right? So you look at his ratings and you go, well, he looks like he should be a pretty good shortstop, and he should be a pretty good shortstop. But relative to when the upper end becomes the elite top layers, then you may see his numbers drop through no harm of his own,
Yeah, it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
You just, yeah, you think you've been preaching for several years now. Like, you don't have one of these guys, try to go offense first, or at least open the mind to that possibility. And it never happens, though. We all want good defenders. It seems like everybody just plays like the no hit all glove guys, and the result of that is it like makes it even harder for the offensive guys to have any defensive value, but then their offensive value is even more pronounced. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I fully admit that my commentary on keep your brain open to the idea of a super offensive player that sacrifices some defense can be overblown by a large factor, right? I mean, you put who were we talking about earlier? You put Newton. What's his name?
Jason Newton, I
Yeah,
think.
you put him at shortstop, and I don't care how good his bat is. Well, that's not completely true. Given his current bat, he would be problematic at shortstop, right? No matter what. But at second base, I don't think he's that problematic. You would probably prefer to have a slightly worse bat and a considerably better glove, but you could compete with him at second base. So you can overblow the idea of put offense in these places without any question.
Are you frustrated by Williams yet? Because I think he should be borderline a star. Like,
Yeah,
he should be like a 3 or 4 WAR player, and he's kind of let you down 2 years in a row.
he
I
has.
assume you're going to lock him up long term, but you got to be a little frustrated.
Yeah, I will still probably lock him up long term if we can, if the numbers aren't too horrible. But I was certainly expecting stronger numbers from him anyway. But then that gets into my down inside the game neep. I'm struggling with this question of what pitcher BABIP is doing inside the game. I've done some interesting, weird studies with my little script to try to get a flavor, and I use Keith Williams as an example, right? One of the reasons why his numbers are as unhappy making as they are, is he has a very large number of balls in his zones that have been hit into the deep zones, which is using out of the park's metrics of, the edge metrics of expected, routine and likely and expected, a lot of them tend to be out in the unlikely ranges of making the plays. So if you look at his field of batted balls hit in his direction versus, pick another shortstop, versus Isam's, how different are they, right? If that's the case, if they're a different field of difficulty, right? What's the level of difficulty that Williams is facing versus the level of difficulty Isom faced? If that level of difficulty is different, how do you judge? I mean, was that because the pitcher's BABIP ratings were different? Is it because the ballpark was different? Would Williams have performed better in Sacramento's ballpark than he did in Bikini's ballpark with Sacramento's pitchers and Bikini's pitchers? These are the things that drive me crazy. Because theoretically that shouldn't be quite the thing, but in the gameplay out of the park neep, it could well be. I don't know. But yes, to answer your bottom line question, I can get quite frustrated about Keith Williams. I thought he should be a stronger shortstop than he has been. But
there's only like a couple guys with 9 infield range who have negative zone ratings, right? And
right.
he's done it 2 years in a row.
Yeah, there you go. But I will say I have consistently had that kind of problem with several of the players on my team, and we're getting into other kind of directions than free agency, which is fine. My travails in trading players who have crashed and burned in Bikini to other teams and watching them blossom into serious players is becoming a trend. I was frustrated by Mike McClure. He did 2.5 WAR 2 or 3 years in a row, and then this last year he essentially fell on his face. I was deeply frustrated with Keita Ishibashi at third base because he was progressing along quite well, and he just crashed last year. I am not suggesting that Bikini should have been a playoff team last year, but there's no reason to think that it couldn't have been based on the fact that it won 89 games the year before, and we came back with essentially the same team and didn't come even close. You can say we overperformed that last year, but none of the guys last year, none of the guys in 2061 were just massively good. We didn't have any 5 WAR players. Suddenly had a burst out 5 WAR thing. So that's the frustration of dealing with a team full of good, not great players, is that when they end up having down years, things don't go particularly well. But now, like Lucio Juarez has been an ace for Montreal. He crashed and burned horribly for us for 2 or 3 years before I finally said enough and moved him, right? Samuel Nebraska, right? We moved him to Las Vegas when he had a 7 ERA for 5 months, and then he pitched Las Vegas into the playoffs. I mean, what do you do? Yes, I'm very frustrated at certain times with several of my players.
The radiation,
Keith Williams being just one.
Whole the lingering radiation. They got to get away from that, and they play better, maybe.
That could well be. Anyway, we were talking offline before this that maybe we could talk about some potential Hall of Famers, but I'm wondering, we've been chatting on this for quite a while. Maybe we should bring this free agency BBA today to an end, and maybe hold on to the idea of future Hall of Famers for another conversation. You have any other things that you wanted to chat about?
No, I'm just looking at the schedule, trying to predict where we'll be next weekend. So we do the Free Agent Sim 1 tonight. Free Agent Sim 2 on Tuesday. And then Thursday is one of my favorites, the Rule 5
Mm-hmm.
Sim. And then Saturday is Free Agent Sim number 4, which takes us to the preseason. So it'll be like January 25th ish, I think, in the game next
Very good.
Sunday when we hopefully record again. We'll see if I'm settled in yet with the baby situation.
I
But
was going to say,
um,
have you done
so we
the
have a big
Chad
week.
thing and given your wife the list of when she is allowed to have a baby? Is that
Well, the good news is I didn't have a single I didn't have a single minor league coaching vacancy, and I locked up all of my ARB guys. I've just been doing nothing for like mini sims now, it feels like, and I don't really plan on signing free agents. So other than the Rule 5 list, which I don't think I can make until that sim, like until that drop down shows up.
right?
There's not a whole lot I planned on doing. So if the Rule 5 sim is on Thursday night, yeah, we might not need to. We might need to go past the due date. I'll have to talk to her about that.
Good luck. I admired Chad because if I had done that, I would not still be living.
Yeah.
I'll say
Sure.
admired. I boggled at Chad that he was still actually drawing breath.
You won a championship.
He
It's,
did.
it's incredible. Yeah.
There
Third,
you go.
third in a row.
Alrighty, well, Kurt, thanks for your time here. It's been a fun conversation bouncing around the league and all the game theory of free agency and stuff. Um, have a great week. Good luck, you and your wife. Fingers crossed, everything goes fantastically for you. I'm very excited um, to hear how you're doing. So,
Appreciate it, Ron. Hope you have a good rest of your week too.
yep, have a great day, and we will get this up and running here pretty quickly.
Sounds good.